Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Table for More. If you were watching me there, I was getting a little emotional because this is not a figurative statement. That was literally the first performance of the Vocal Essence Singers of This Age 4 years ago this fall. That was our first performance in Orchestra Hall in Minneapolis at our Witness concerts. And so I noticed my slide. I didn't edit the slide because I wasn't sure I was going to play that one until just about 30 minutes ago, since we're about to start school again. And there are four singers who are in that picture there in that video who are still in the choir now, who have become our first 4-year graduates. A couple of them you met in the video introductions from the first 2 weeks. The reason I chose that song is twofold. A, this is a season in which we have choices to make now as to how and who will move us forward and how we will live together. I'm talking about the election. And while I'm not advocating one candidate over another openly, I am saying that we all have an obligation to lead with love and to let love dictate how we make decisions. So I just thought I'd throw that out there to encourage us. And then number two, again, just to show you, I've been showing pictures and videos of the group recently, kind of where we started from in that first performance, a song that talks about bringing people together. And when we think about repertoire today with our two distinguished panelists, Dr. Daryl Taylor and Dr. Marcus Garrett, we're going to approach it from the standpoint of how we can consider these topics, these conversations around race, equity, inclusion, which we've termed as belonging, and access, to really intentionally engage our constituents in the singing process. And perhaps I should go further and be bold to say those who we want to be constituents. By constituents, I mean singers, board members, audience members, patrons, community supporters. How can we be intentional about the way we consider our repertoire and our programming so that more people can be at the table with us, authentically at the table with us? Let me go back to my screen share and just give you a little brief reminder. We're actually going to go to breakout rooms first here to get to know each other, because you're going to spend some time with this group. And so in that breakout room, you're going to do some introductions, and then we'll come back using my metaphor of unpacking our groceries. That'll be our conversations with Daryl and Marcus. There'll be some Q&A embedded in there. You'll be able to put questions in the chat. Today is more of a conversation than presentation, by the way. Then we'll go back to breakout groups again to dig a little deeper into the questions we asked you to think about in preparation for today's meeting. And then I'll give you the plan for our fourth and final wrap-up webinar where we'll do some action planning for the year. So just a reminder, what I call our shopping list, these are the 12 things that I want you to just keep in your mind as we engage together. I'm going to highlight a few of them today. I know you can read them. I really want you to commit to curiosity today. As we're thinking about repertoire and expanding our horizons of composers and genres that we can embed within our programming, commit to curiosity, and then over on the other side, give yes and a chance. No matter what your organization specializes in, no matter what your current repertoire range is or programmatic range is, try out yes and. By that I mean don't put a period on a sentence that could have a colon or a semicolon or a comma, okay? And then let's always assume good intentions and be aware of our impact today, because today is the day that we might step into it a little bit and say things. So speak to be understood, listen to understand, and then lean into that discomfort. Those are the ones that I really, really want you to kind of think about today, but you may find another one that speaks to you also. So a reminder from last week, again today, cognitive dissonance is going to be important that you consider. Oftentimes when confronted with new evidence that refutes things that we hold dear to our heart, we stand our ground and we refuse it. And I just want you to be mindful of that when it happens to you, and just take a step back and see if you can open yourself up to that wonder and that curiosity. Because we talk about the fact that the music of the enslaved Africans and the music of Bach holding the same space and the same weight, that might be something that hits you hard in the face. or the fact that when I program all state choirs these days, I'm not concerned about programming something from historical errors. I'm concerned about programming pieces that are relevant and that carry a certain theme and thread and that teach the young people something. So these two things can be true at the same time. And then a reminder, many of you commented on this quote. I think it's important to remind us again, as you think about your organization, every system is perfectly designed to get the results that it gets. So if you're wondering why your organization looks a certain way, it's because of the way it's designed. For you, these are all reminders. Continue to reflect on why you keep coming back and how you're articulating what you care about the most. Because long after these webinars end, these are the 3 steps that are going to help you to really guide where you go as a person, as an individual in this field, and where your organization goes, and the action steps that you take and who you engage with moving forward. So with that, I am just really thrilled to introduce 2 relatively new friends of mine here to our table for more. I dare say I think I've met you both in passing, but really haven't connected until the quarantine Zoom world here. So excited to engage in this conversation today. We have with us Dr. Marcus Garrett and Dr. Daryl Taylor, and you can see them now, but just in the interest of making sure you see them, I'll share a little picture of both of them here, and we'll see if they like the picture that I chose for them today.
Ooh, that can be scary.
Daryl Taylor's performances have been noted for their compelling artistry and authority. He is an international career highlighted by performances of art song, opera, and oratorio, and his repertoire extends from Bach to Britten and beyond. He's a lecturer that is really gifted in the areas of African American art song and has given lectures and master classes at many of our most prestigious institutions across this country. He's a native of Detroit, Michigan, got to throw that in there, and holds degrees from Southern California and University of Michigan, and is the founder of the African American Art Song Alliance. So we welcome Dr. Daryl Taylor to the table today. And his companion at the table is Dr. Marcus Garrett, who holds degrees from Hampton University, UNC Greensboro, North Carolina Greensboro, and Florida State University. A Virginia native, Dr. Garrett is an assistant professor of music and choral activities at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. He directs chamber choirs, university chorale, and teaches graduate choral literature. He is also a known clinician and lecturer working with all ages of singers and has studied with Andre Thomas, among other folks. A versatile baritone and countertenor. That was something new about you that I didn't know, Dr. Garrett there. He is a composer, avid composer of choral and solo works, and they have been performed by many choirs, including Seraphic Fire and the Oakwood University Aeolians. And in his research, the area that he's most known for is in the area of non-idiomatic choral music of Black composers. So we welcome Dr. Marcus L.A. Garrett to the table with us today also. Gentlemen, thank you for saying yes, to giving up a little time here. I know it's a busy time. You're both either back in school or about to be back in school. So thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for the invite.
Absolutely. We'll just jump right in. And I think the first thing to do is to let you both share a little bit about how you have come to your areas of research or that you're known for the most. You know, Daryl, your work with art song by Black composers, those from the African diaspora, what you've done to catalog and to highlight and amplify the works of Black composers. And then Marcus talking about the works of Black composers that are outside of the idioms that most people have known us to compose in. Daryl, why don't you take us first?
Well, thanks for the invite, and it's lovely to be with your community virtually. Yeah, I miss travel. I miss getting on those crowded planes and and getting to different places. My investigation into African American art song started gosh, when I was just beginning voice training, my first voice teacher suggested to me, she said, but Daryl, you might consider looking at works by Black composers just to create to carve an artistic niche for yourself. And this, by the way, was not an African American woman. This was a lovely woman by the name of June Roselle. Um, and I said, okay, being dutiful. And then I went about looking for that, and it was very, very hard to find. Now, of course, in that day, music was written on stone tablets, and so we were. It was not all that easy to cart them around. But in all seriousness, when I started graduate school, that was about the time that there was a proliferation of the internet. And even with that, I found that it was very difficult to find repertoire and find information on the composers and various styles. And I took an independent study with Willis Patterson at the University of Michigan. And as part of that, I wrote a 30-page paper on the importance of studying African American art song. And that became then published. Well, it didn't become published, it was published by the Journal of Singing. And there was an appendix that the journal had suggested on publisher information. That publisher information um, appendix became kind of the nexus of my alliance. I wanted to share it on the internet, and so I created the African American Art Song Alliance, and I just wanted to pool information and say, if you're beginning your study, your investigation, this is where you should begin. And it just kind of grew from that. And as part of that, I have convened a conference every 5 years here in California at the University of California, Irvine, on this performance and study of African American art song and some of its related subject matter as well. And fortunately for us, we weren't scheduled to present a convention or conference um, uh, during the current iteration of our crisis. We are scheduled for our 25th anniversary. It has been 25 years I've been doing this. Well, I was doing it before the 25th, but 25 years since the establishing of the Alliance. And that will be it's scheduled February 2022. It's usually the second weekend in February. Assuming that we can meet in person in 2022, I'm moving forward with plans for that. And if we're not able to meet February, then I would then try and because I think it's valuable to meet in person, I'd move that to then September and see if we couldn't all by then have a way forward in meeting together and singing for each other and kissing and hugging and not being, overly concerned other than I can't remember the last time I checked my breath.
It's very real. You kind of get your breath in your mask. That's about the only time you get a whiff of it. Now.
Listen. You have to be. If ever we wanted to reform our ability to for our mouth health, those masks will reinforce that. Say, listen, this is what you're putting out to the world.
Oh, very true. I feel that's a whole nother conversation for us another day. So I want to let everyone know that the Art Song Alliance, we've given you access to the webpage. We put the URL there. In fact, we just updated it so you can explore that at your leisure there and get to become more intimate with the resources there. And we're going to come back and talk about that momentarily. Marcus, why don't we have you invite you into the conversation and give a little introduction to your work that you're doing these days. Thank you, Daryl.
Yeah. Yes, thank you, Philip, again for the invitation, and it's an honor to be able to be in a conversation with Dr. Taylor. I've looked up to him for quite some time. I remember in undergrad, back when I decided to only listen to classical music, and there were some albums that I had discovered back then. Some of the work that he's done with Dr. Louise Toppin, and then being able to finally, I think the only time that we met was probably at the last African American Art Song Alliance conference in 2017. So that was fantastic. Um, uh, so I am Marcus Garrett, pronouns are he, him, his, and I got started on this topic of the non-idiomatic choral music of Black composers when I was in undergrad, but I didn't realize it. So Hampton University is a historically Black college in Virginia, and I was a member of the concert choir, which was our touring group, and typically Roosevelt Dillard would have the concert set up into 4 sections. We usually started off with European or choral standards. So you would hear just, Beethoven, Haydn, Randall Thompson, pretty much all men, all white men. And then we would typically shift to our Black composers, and it was almost always original music. We tended to end that first half with the hymn arrangement by Nathan Carter because that just takes you to church, and it's really difficult to do anything after that, so we'd have to have intermission. And then we had, I believe, then we would do spirituals and gospel in other sets. Well, it wasn't until I got to University of North Carolina, Greensboro, and I'm having conversations with my peers about composers like Adolphus Hale Stork and his cantata, I Will Lift Up Mine Eyes, or talking about Undine Smith Moore and R. Nathaniel Dett. And my friends are like, I don't know who these people are. I've never heard of these works. And I'm like, did I have a different experience than everybody else? I mean, I knew I was only around Black people, but I thought that I was still doing what everybody else was doing. And after 12 years, I then realized, yeah, it was very different. So when I was in graduate school, I mean, at Florida State, people are always presenting, and not just faculty members, but it's also my colleagues. And so I was like, well, maybe for my last year, I can go ahead and think about presenting on this topic because I do enjoy it. And I hadn't come up with the term non-idiomatic. I was just talking about the fact that I love the music of Black composers that's original and doesn't use spirituals, gospel, and jazz. And so one of my closest friends said, I think you might mean like non-idiomatic because, idiomatic is those styles. And I was like, oh, that sounds really smart. I'm going to go with that. So I do have to give credit to Alex Favaza for helping me create that term. And yeah, since then, it's been about 3 years now, I think, that I've been presenting, 2.5, 3 years presenting on this topic, and had a handout of some repertoire of these choral pieces, and that got shared with a few folks. And then I created a website back in March and decided to go ahead and put a page up there specifically on that. But I also have another page to tie into, I always believe in transfers, finding ways of connecting. And so one of the other research tabs that I have is actually a list of all of Harry T. Burleigh's art songs that I've was able to. The Library of Congress website has almost all of his art songs up there, and they were all as individual JPEGs, and every page was an individual one. So me being the wonderful nerd that I am, I sat in the library, downloaded all of those, and then put them together. It took many hours. And so, I mean, for all of the different voicings, and actually, right before I got here, I fell in love with Burleigh's song cycle, the 5 Songs of Lawrence Hope. Till I Wake is one of the most beautiful art songs you will ever hear. I mean, there are very few that are better than that. I think the only one that I like more is probably Leslie Adams. It's from the 5 Malay. I can't think of. It's in B flat. It's in mine. Okay, it'll come back to me later. But anyway, yeah, yes. So with the Burleigh, I actually arranged that 5 Songs of Lawrence Hope for choir. 3 of them are for mixed choir. 1 is for soprano alto. 1 is for tenor bass. We premiered that at UNL with my chamber singers my first year. GIA agreed to publish that. So that's going to be coming out. And it's a way for me to help facilitate conversation, to let people know these pieces were originally solo pieces. Burley has some great spirituals, but guess what? His art songs are better. I mean, that's a personal opinion. You may disagree, and I'm totally fine with that. And so, yeah, and then it's just kind of just blossomed from there, and I've been having a blast.
You know, that's a great jumping off point for us. And your joy just is effervescent. It's contagious, right? It started as inquiry, and from inquiry you did some deep digging and learning, and I think that's a place for everyone. You know, even as black men, you hear these stories, and I'm in the same boat. It starts as a kernel of activity, and we have these experiences, but then we have to do our own research too. I think people assume because we're black that we come with the knowledge already there. No, there's a lot to learn, and you just named that Burley set. I don't know that set, so I got to go and find it now. You know, I know the art songs, but I didn't know that they were arranged for choir. And that's a perfect place because you mentioned Burley's spirituals. Everyone knows Burley's spirituals. They're amazing. But not everyone knows that Burley wrote outside of that idiomatic style. And so, for many people in the room, I would dare say the easiest way to begin an entry point into expanding repertoire into black composers in particular would be to stick with things that are steeped in the Western European tradition. So, how can we? I'll phrase it this way. Let's talk about the range and depth of black composers in that Western European tradition across time. Let's start there first. Maybe you want to throw out a few names from art songs, compositions, but let's just kind of whet their appetite with the fact that composers of African descent have been composing in the European style for many, many, many years. Who wants to go first?
Well, Dr. Taylor, I don't know. What would you say is the first solo piece by a black composer that you know of?
Well, I mean, if you're talking about African American, or if you're talking about the African diaspora, that changes the
Yeah.
conversation
Yeah,
significantly.
let's go diaspora.
Uh,
I think wider.
well, okay, well, what's your schedule like?
I know
'Cause,
we got time,
uh,
right?
so one of the curiosities that you'll find that will reveal itself as you're investigating outside of what's been put on our plate by the standard canon is um, that Black people have been part of societies all over the world, um, either as indigenous people or as people brought in, either migrants or people that have been brought in as labor, um, um, and have participated in societies since, well, since as long as there's been societies. So you shouldn't be surprised when Black presence presents itself in ways that had been consumed or presented as part of the majority culture, so that the writer of the Three Musketeers or the Man in the Iron Mask was of Black parentage. The father of Russian literature was of Black parentage. And so you find Black presence in places where we have, by the presentation of what we consider to be um, um, a period presentation of the 18th and 17th, 18th century, you think, oh, well, Black people were just slaves. Well, no, they were courtiers. They were in all levels of society. I remember reading the book Wuthering Heights and being struck by the fact that because I was aware of the movie of Wuthering Heights, but when you read the drama, Heathcliff is a Black person. Said, well, wait a minute, Laurence Olivier is not Black, so how did that wind up being translated? Is that by turning your gaze to, oh, well, we'll normalize this sort of thing, you wind up then excising the Blackness out of the experience. And I think that there's a certain element of Black composers that want to be just be considered as a Black composer, but their Blackness gets consumed into the majority population, the majority element, and then the assumption then is that, oh, if this person was writing during this period, they must be a white composer, or they must be a white person, because after all, who else was intelligent enough, or had the agency to present in that time? We know, of course, now that that's a bunch of malarkey. The idea of um, um, a certain segment of population being more or less intelligent. Um, so that we have the first composer that jumps to mind that is Joseph Bologna, the Chevalier de Saint Georges, who wrote in the court of Versailles, and is often referred to as the Black Mozart. Though a lot of people take exception with that they don't he was more better seated in the aristocracy than was Mozart. Mozart, wasn't part of um, the court in the way that Joseph Bologna was. Um, there's the George Bridgetower was a violinist. He wasn't a composer per se, but he was a violinist for whom Beethoven wrote the Bridgetower violin sonata. Um, um, Sanchez, Ignacio Sanchez, um, Brazil. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot there.
Well, I actually, back in June, for those that don't know, June is Black Music Month. And in the wake of of George Floyd's murder, exceptional height of the Black Lives Matter movement, there was an Instagram post that someone shared with me and said, you need to check out these conductors, composers, musicians, blah, 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 blah. They said all this. And the first page on that Instagram post was about Black composers. And I was like, okay, cool. And they went chronological. And I was like, whoa, hold on. Does that say 1521 to 1563? Whoa. So I then did a little investigation and was just blessed to be connected with two gentlemen who are associated with professional choirs. And they were able to give me a few more resources and then get connected. And I learned about the name Vicente Lusitano. So he was a Portuguese composer of African descent. He is considered the first Black composer to be published. Now, if you don't mind, because of my conversations with the gentleman who sings with Voces 8, and Blake Morgan has been fantastic. If you don't follow him on Instagram or on Facebook, then you need to. And he put together for the month of July 31 Black choral composers. And he had a separate page for each day for each one of them. And then he actually put it together recently so you can use it in classrooms. Well, because he sings with Voces 8 and their repertoire has been pretty much the same. He said that he has been talking to his friends and constituents with the organization to see how they can diversify their repertoire. So when I told him about that and just thinking about the type of music that they perform, mentioned Lusitano, and they did a performance just a couple weeks ago. And if y'all don't mind, I will let them talk a little bit about this gentleman, and then we'll hear just a little bit of that piece. Oh, wrong one. So sorry. Let's do this again. Wrong thing. Let's go. I should have this by now, you would think. There we go.
That was a nice George Walker, though.
I don't know what. Oh, for some reason, it's not pulling. Oh, well. It's not pulling up. For some reason, it keeps going to. Oh, I know why. Let's try one more thing. Good old technology. Good old technology. There it is.
There it is.
Zoom. I'll stop that share. Let me try it one more time. You'd think I'd know after all these things that I've done. All right.
Say hello to everyone. Oh, you're all here. Barney's there too. How about that? Chris is keys, and he went off to be a priest in Italy, where he was also known as a principal theorist, musical theorist of his day, with a keen interest in harmonic language, to the point that he became embroiled in a very public debate with an Italian man, and despite the fact Lusitano won that debate, publicly was declared the winner, I think, and this is why I get slightly confused, Vicento, who was the Italian man, went about a series of propaganda against Lusitano, and Lusitano left Italy almost in disgrace, despite the fact he'd won the argument, and went off to Germany, where he wrote in relative obscurity for the rest of his life, and certainly his music is not well known to this day because of that propaganda during his lifetime. And there is one existing source of this work. It's called Regina Coeli. Also of interest, Lusitano was the son of Portuguese nobility, but as it transpires, we think is the first ever published black composer. So this is his Regina Coeli.
Okay, so you don't need me to play much more. You understand. And as Philip said from before, one of the things that happens when people are trying to diversify their repertoire is they try to go completely left field, like all the way out of the camera, like you see now. And you don't have to go that far. You can think about what is the music that other composers, and it's sad that we have to say other, but we understand that the standard has been anything that's white. That is what's considered right, it's considered good, it's what we study in school, which is a reason, I'm grateful that for a while folks didn't talk about it, because hey, it's given me a reason to have so many conversations this summer and this fall, to the point that I had to like tell people, I'm sorry, I have my students to teach, I can't teach yours right now, but let's look at the spring. And so, Dr. Taylor and I both have been able to give this a platform, and thankfully with social media, it's able to get to people so quickly. So you have Lusitano, whose music is not the easiest, but there, as someone said in the chat, there are some pieces on CPDL. There's another gentleman by the name of Gareth Thomas, who has also transcribed some of this music. Chanticleer will be performing some of Lusitano's music very soon, probably publishing it in a couple years. So this music is coming out. And then Dr. Taylor mentioned, because we're talking about earlier composers, he also mentioned Brazil. And when I'm thinking choir, I think Jose Mauricio Nunez Garcia. And if you don't know this gentleman, and I'm putting it in the chat right now, Nunez Garcia was the first musician of the Kingdom of Portugal. Always about transfer, trying to find ways to connect everything. So we just finished talking about Lusitano, who is Portuguese. Now we're talking about Nunez Garcia, and there are a ton of pieces available for you to do by him. He wrote the first opera in Brazil. He was, I said, the first musician of the Kingdom of Portugal. Folks loved him there. They still do. You go to YouTube, search his name, pretty much all the recordings are by Brazilian choirs and orchestras. And he also conducted the Brazilian premiere of Mozart's Requiem. And so when you look at his 1816 Requiem, because he wrote 3, when you look at that one, I think it's like CPM 185, you will hear in the first movement, the first like 2 measures of the choir, he's like, hold on. He's like, Requiem Aeterna. He got that from somebody else. Well, he was studying Mozart's Requiem, trying to get ready to conduct it. And then the first couple measures or few of the Dies Irae also are heavily influenced by Mozart. But the rest of the Requiem, all of his other music, it's just it. And when you listen to it, it sounds like something Haydn or Mozart would have written. It's just straight up classical music that does not have any of this, again, idiomatic influence. So you're not trying to listen for folk and that kind of stuff. And I'm grateful for people like Delerma, Professor Delerma, who he talked about him quite a bit. And there is an album that is it here? No, it's in my office at school, where they have so many of the symphonic and choral orchestral works that CBS Records did a few decades ago, and Delerma helped to put those things together. So yeah, all right, I'm done talking about that because I could keep going.
No, but that's so exciting because I feel that same joy. And, I came to this they know my history here for you guys, for you, Dr. Taylor and Dr. Garrett. I grew up singing in church on Sunday and singing in the boy choir through the week, right? What got me going to college to study music was Bach. It was Mozart. Um, Kind of like Dr. Andre Thomas's story is I loved the spirituals, but I wasn't thinking of studying them. I loved them actually, but I didn't think we'd study them. We didn't need it. It was this other stuff. And when I found out about Garcia, I went crazy. It was in my doctoral program, and I programmed it for our campus choir right away, and just like went crazy, communicating with people back and forth in Brazil about, oh my goodness, this music from the Baroque period matches the music of Bach, from the classical period matches the music of Mozart. And you know, we can have a question later about which was first and who influenced whom. That's another conversation. The reason I wanted to start there with everyone in the room, because I see people asking questions about appropriation, and that's a long conversation. If you start in the idiomatic style, or the idiom that you're used to, let's say, if you perform art song normally, you perform classical music steeped in European tradition, if you engage with composers of different cultures, Black and beyond, who write in that style, then you have automatically eliminated the controversy around appropriation, okay? All you're doing now is amplifying and giving space in something that's very authentic and natural to your organization, to composers and communities that have been marginalized and silenced, okay? So I want to make sure everybody gets that. This is kind of weird not seeing everybody's faces, but I know this is the best way. So that's the first thing. Now let's start to transition, because people are asking a question and I have questions from before, and this is where I want you guys to push the envelope a little bit. One person said, what is your opinion about choosing repertoire that does not offend? We've had several incidents where we've chosen repertoire for a concert, but it offends someone. And that leads right into the same thing about appropriation. And this is a longer conversation. We're not going to get all the way into it. What I want to focus on for our conversation is if the two of you can think about what are some criteria in your mind that conductors and voice teachers who are white or not Black can engage with music of Black and other communities that are not white outside of the European tradition. What are the criteria? What are the steps that you think they should consider as they look to engage with this music? Because here's the reality. You're always going to have someone to disagree with you. My stance is if you have great intentionality and you know why you're doing it and you can live with that, that's going to have to be your compass at the end. So let's talk about criteria.
I don't think intention is enough, but because you could have someone call you the N word and they say, well, my intention was to be, you know, your brother would say, well, yeah, but don't do that.
Right.
Your intention aside, you get a fat lip. But I want to underscore that we are first and foremost artists, and art rarely takes as its lead not offending. Art usually says let's explore, but as informed artists, we want to be as educated on the where something sits in the historical paradigm, and um, educated in terms of style, and be prepared that if you don't present anything from various cultures, you can offend by the fact that you're navel gazing. You're only doing that which is right in front of you, and if you reach out beyond your immediate grasp, you can and will you will offend. So I think you need to get past that there will be some people that if you decide to just innocently enough put schedule Ain't It That Good News, William Dawson, there are going to be some people who say, well, I didn't come to go to church, and you're presenting all this Christian dogma, but you didn't have a problem with that when we were doing the Bach Magnificat. So why is this suddenly an issue? And it is that this comes a little closer to their reckoning of what their own prejudices, and it's usually people that are offended that way are usually revealing much more of what's in their filter than what is actually on the artistic plate. We have to be very careful, however, that we not um, fall into the well of what minstrelsy presented, which was derision or cultural appropriation for the sake of simply making a joke out of any culture. That is not acceptable on any level for any culture. Um, um, while you'll not only be receive a lot of pushback, you'll deserve all that pushback that you get. But I think that I'll present a story of myself as a graduate student presenting Margaret Bond's Three Dream Portraits. Now, I grew up in Detroit, very much as a product of the inner city in Detroit, singing gospel, being surrounded by Black culture everywhere I went. And so my Blackness to me was never in question. Um, but I sometimes unaware of the outer package that sometimes goes forward, and I'm going la di da di da. Here's my Black experience, and people will kind of scratch their heads, say, "Really?" Say, "Yeah, really." Have a longer conversation with me. You'll see. Eventually, it'll present itself. But I remember singing Margaret Bond's Three Dream Portraits, and having one of my Black colleagues come up to me and say, "You have some nerve singing Black like me." I said, What?" And I remember being really, really very, very shocked by that. It was my first time interfacing with that's their prejudice, that's their ignorance. It's not my intention is clear. I know exactly who I am, but they have some work to do in terms of understanding who I am, understanding my perspective. And should I not have presented Black like me, or do I have to do a disclaimer every time I sing that, I really am a Black man and I have an authentic Black experience? No, I don't think I need to do that at all. And if I don't have a Black experience at all, yeah, I don't have. It was many years into adulthood before I went to Austria, but I had to sing music of Schubert and had to understand that experience and had to study it, that which I did not know I needed to study. Um, I, I don't want to dominate that. I think that gives you my take on it, Mark.
And one of the interesting things about all of this is that we have to understand that no matter what we claim as our title, that whatever we do, we are educating people. And so it is important for us to educate. So in the case, there are probably some people who are thinking, okay, well, I may know of Margaret Bonds or I don't, but I'm assuming that that's a woman. If you're talking about a Black woman, I want to make sure that I do more stuff by Black women because men still dominate so much of what we do. But how do I, as a non-Black person, sing that Black like me? And I would say it would then be appropriate for you to use your recital, and pre-concert talks are great, program notes are great as well, but you don't have everyone's attention until you're on the stage. So if when you're on the stage, you then give them a little bit of history, backstory, education, you've got everybody. Now there are many people who probably disagree with me because they said, I just came to hear singing. And that's fine. But if you don't give them the context, then there will be more people who will be offended. So as a non-Black person, you can say, I'm performing this piece not to say that I am Black. I'm not Rachel Dolezal here. What I'm trying to say is I have a place of privilege and a platform where this music, this composer, and this poet can be elevated so more people can know about them. Not necessarily to say that we need to do more of this piece, but we can also now think about other things. So education is really big with all of this. And you can just think about how all of this music, as you said, Philip, it breaks down the barrier of appropriation. I gave a talk back in November about non-idiomatic music, and someone came up to me and said, "Hey, so I want to ask you about spirituals." Well, that wasn't the topic, but whatever. As Andre Thomas said to me, because I'm Black, I'm expected to be an expert on all Black things, whether I've studied it or not. And a little sidebar, just because somebody's Black doesn't mean they're the expert, doesn't mean that they know about spirituals or gospel or Black art songs and that kind of stuff. So don't think that you can just go down to the street and get this person to come in and they're going to do an excellent job, or that everything they say is going to be accurate, because they will likely misguide you. And then you're going to do that in a more public place. And then you will have people like Jeff Redding, Jeff Ames, Andre Thomas, Persephone Powell, who all know each other, would sit there. They won't say anything in the concert, but there will be a meeting after the meeting. And we'll be like, did you see where they did that? Yeah, because we all have meetings after the meetings. We all do. You know about that. But anyway, I think about that conversation where she asked me, the American Spiritual Ensemble is performing. They have in their bio that they are to promote and preserve the Negro spiritual. I was told that Negro spiritual is a problem. Now, so what should I do? I'll tell you my personal take. I use the term Negro because it helps to put people in a historical framework. It was one of the earliest terms that was used. Too often when we think, because some people have asked about cultural appropriation. And so when we think about performing that music, most times, one, we only do the happy ones. You can tell the world about this. I mean, all that kind of stuff, which is great. They're fine pieces, but there's so many others. But we only do the Jubilee spirituals. We do them at the end of our recital or our concert. And we forget about the history of spirituals. So when I would go to the predominantly white schools in Nebraska, and for those that don't know, because many of you are like in Minnesota and Boston, you probably got a little more diversity. Nebraska's not that diverse. There are not that many of us here. Believe me, I know this. So I go to the predominantly white high schools. They asked me to work on the spiritual, among other things, because Black conductors can do Moses Hogan and Andre Thomas just as well as we can do Bach and Brahms. And I work on the spiritual after I've listened to them sing it once, and I talk for at least 15 minutes about the history of spirituals, so that those high school students understand what happened to those enslaved Africans, the fact that many of them didn't make it over here, being sold on auction blocks, their families being separated, only having one pair of shoes or one article of clothing to last a year, not having that much. I mean, all of those things, they got to understand. So when you're singing Elijah Rock by Moses Hogan, it's not just about how high your sopranos can go and how low your basses can go. If they can really get all the way down, oh, Elijah, oh, yeah, we don't know. It's not just about that. If you're thinking about the slaves, why are they worried about a rock? They need something to hold on to. They want a foundation. They need something that they know is solid. And so, I mean, you have to put all those things into context. So just always thinking about education. I may have taken us so far off, so I'm going to stop talking and let Philip bring it back home.
Well,
I love
Marcus, one of the things that you talk about, I really want to underscore. We've veered off a few times now into spirituals when we're talking about works by Black composers. And you talked about Burley and how his reputation was consumed by the popularity of the spiritual. When you go to investigate Black composers, especially African American experience, you have to do so with a real affirmative energy and zeal to move beyond what is immediately presented to you. That the Black experience is not delimited entirely to the arrangement of spirituals. For instance, in the solo voice realm, Hale Smith is known for writing some, I mean, really, really glorious spirituals, but you will never find them in print, and that's intentionally. I know this because I had conversations with Hale Smith, and he says, I don't want people to only know my spiritual work. Usually when you put the spiritual out, that's what everybody cleaves to, and suddenly they have no idea that you've written these other things. He says, if you want to do my works, here are the ones that are in print. and that's what you should make as your default. H.T. Burley was an editor for G Recordi,
Yes.
and had significant success on the concert stage with his songs. McCracken and other soloists sang his solo repertoire, not just the spirituals, sang his solo repertoire around the world. Um, it's because of, however, the popularity of Deep River and other such arrangements that it obscured. It became this huge object that cast a huge shadow over the rest of his body of work. And so when you find yourself, I do have a point in what I'm saying. When you find yourself focused on the spirituals, or you say, oh, these interesting spirituals of Paul Johnson, or I would say, um, go further and dig into, well, what else is in that orbit, and what is beyond the spiritual. You will do in terms of educating yourself and educating your populace. You'll do yourself a great service by doing so.
Can I say, I just want to make a quick transfer from Harry T. Burley, because one of the composers that I wanted to mention is Samuel Coleridge Taylor, a British composer whose father was from Africa. He didn't really know his father because his father was a great doctor, but because of racism during the late 19th century, couldn't get any patients. So he was like, you know what, I'm gonna go back to Africa where I know they'll let me help them out. And Coleridge Taylor, while he lived a short life, was very famous. I mean, 1875 to 1912. Edward Elgar, yeah, and Edward Elgar is the reason why we know about him, because he recommended him for the Three Choirs Festival and wrote the violin concerto for that. Huge success. Charles Villiers Stanford, who many of you probably know, was Coleridge Taylor's teacher, conducted the premiere of Hiawatha's Wedding Feast. If you don't know that work, you are missing out. And we have voice teachers and choir directors in here. So here's where we put the two together. So Hiawatha's Wedding Feast had, I mean, upwards of 200 performances a year during Coleridge Taylor's life. Yes. Coleridge Taylor made 3 tours to the U.S. And as Dr. Taylor was saying, I mean, he was an influence on Black composers in the U.S. because they saw him as being like it. Like, he has achieved the status that we want, but because of even more racism over here, we haven't been able to get it. So many people sponsored him to come over. And for one of the performances of Hiawatha's Wedding Feast in D.C. with the Samuel Coleridge Taylor Society, which was a 200-member Black chorus in the early 20th century, they got, I think it was either the U.S. Army Band or Navy Band, one of those that actually played for that choir. Coleridge Taylor conducted. Guess who was the baritone soloist? Harry T. Burley. Burley was the soloist for that. Now, if there are any tenors in the house today, you can just say yes in the chat. Yes, On a Way, Awake, Beloved. I'm going to put that On a Way, Awake, Beloved. It is one of the most gorgeous arias I have ever heard. So just go check that out. IMSLP has
it. Really long.
But it is gorgeous. Check that out. And just to, as you're planning, because I know some of us are like, I don't know if anything's going to happen in 2021 or 2022. Well, guess what? You've got 4.5 years to prepare a Samuel Coleridge Taylor Festival. His sesquicentennial is 2025. He has plenty of art songs. He has plenty of choral pieces. He's got plenty of piano works and that kind of stuff. So just have fun with him. Oh.
He is so influential that he is the only non-American composer that I include in the African American Arts Alliance, because he is foundational to the inspiration of countless composers. There were Samuel Coleridge Taylor societies all across the country. I mean, William Grant Still, no less a composer than William Grant Still, was so influenced by him that he dressed like him, styled his hair like him, wanted very much to embody his influence.
So this is this is exactly what I wanted to happen, was just to listen to you two go back and forth and to nod and smile. And we could keep going. I've promised these folks we're going to have a little bit of a breakout time. And just so everyone knows, we're going to go to breakout and stay until the half past the hour. And then you're welcome to stay on, and I will convene extra conversation until 1 p.m. that we told you about to unpack some of this. So we're going to end this time together with these two amazing gentlemen by just throwing out names of composers. And I'm going to show my choral bias. These are names that if you don't know them, you need to look them up. Florence Price, Undine Moore, Ulysses Kay,
Oh, yes.
George Walker. I had one more I was going to throw out there Joel Thompson, going modern, going current. Okay, there's my 5 for now. You all put some names out there.
And I'll say that for Florence Price, G. Shermer now owns the rights to her music. And so if you at least once a year check their website, you will see that more music is coming out, all different types. The first composer, I mean, you've heard me mention some already, and Ulysses Kay is one of my absolute favorites. But R. Nathaniel Dett is the top. He's the top for me. That's why I did my dissertation on him, and I could go on and on about why he was so influential. Adolphus Hailstork is another. Margaret Bonds, I love, and 2 women who have just different types of music. There's a woman in England, her name is Hannah Kendall. And yes, I love B.E. Boykin as well. She's a good friend of mine. Hannah Kendall, her piece Regina Celli is one you just got to check out at some point. It's hard, but it's just good listening. Good listening. And the other woman, you mentioned Brittany, and that took me off track. Zenaida Robles, who is out in California, and my choir is going, oh, somebody said it, yay. Kendall is Kendall, I believe.
Thank you.
But you'll find it. And Zenaida Robles, my choir is actually gonna do her Veni Sancte Spiritus, which is, it kind of brings some styles together and that kind of stuff. And whether we do it in person or virtual, I know they're gonna love that, so yeah.
So obviously my 5 would be more focused on solo repertoire. I'd say the top of it, it won't be any surprise, H. Leslie Adams, who also wrote choral work, but and worked as a choral composer and wrote things for his choir. He has this wonderful piece called The Righteous Man. Interesting work. H. Leslie Adams, Robert Owens, Adolphus Hailstork, Jacqueline Hairston, Andre Myers. Andre Myers is out here in California, fabulous composer, young composer, but I mean, has such a gift for lyricism and simplicity. It's straightforward and uncomplicated. I'd also add into that Dave Ragland. Dave Ragland is really, really gifted as a composer for just simplicity, and can take you emotionally to the place without a lot of complication, and also works significantly with choral. I've not seen his choral stuff, but I can't imagine that he's written this much for voice and doesn't write for choral. Marquez,
he does have some choral music as well, and I do have to say that I'm grateful to Dr. Taylor for his the conference that you hosted. I mean, because the one year that I went, I was able to hear our mutual friend Philip Harris perform my song cycle, which was so much fun. And a few people have been buying it now that I have a website, so that makes me happy. So I look forward to hearing some more. So yeah, what I see there are some chats in some questions in the chat about providing a list of all of these composers. I think the easiest thing, especially like with the early ones. Oh, Lily Guerrero is here. Oh my gosh, I love Lily. I'm sorry, we were at Florida State together, so I just saw her name. Hi. Just shoot me an email, and I can mention some of the things that I talked about. And actually on the resource page in the Google Doc, when you go to my website, at the top, most of those early composers are there, but I haven't had a chance to update all of it because I've been preparing for the semester and that kind of stuff. But yeah, just shoot me an email. We can go from there.
Yeah. And we'll put those in as well, folks. We'll give you some resources and connect the dots as well in our table for more
If you
section.
go to the Art Song Alliance, and just click on composers, there's a huge list. Also, I direct you to the African Diaspora Music Project.org, um, put together by Louise Toppin, that also has, well, it doesn't have a directory per se, but it's a searchable database where if you put in any parameters of, I want a piece for baritone with this range, or just baritone, it will populate with a ton of stuff and will help you significantly that way. And so you don't necessarily have to know um, um, a particular composer's name. So all of these things are like puzzle pieces working together, hopefully to inform the best. But here's the thing, I don't think that any of us are inclined to do all of the work for everybody. There is a certain amount of research that you have to do, and you have to, I mean, and by doing that, by being left to that, you think can create something that is not cookie cutter and is not formulaic, and you can find the stuff that most moves your community, and um, yeah, so use those resources that I've suggested to get you started. I would also say for those that have a real interest in stepping beyond the canon, and especially working with African American composers, a good place to start is Randy Jones's book, So You Want to Sing Spirituals. I say that because it goes beyond spirituals. It goes well beyond spirituals, and talks about African American art song, and has with it certain appendices that are available online. And those appendices are worth their weight in gold. Randy Jones, So You Want to Sing Spirituals.
Yeah, and
Randy,
if I
Randye.
And if you, just one last thing that I'll say, and as Dr. Taylor said about doing the research, it will take some time because we have not learned about a lot of this stuff. And so as we're thinking about diversifying our repertoire, and trying to hopefully diversify our audiences and boards and that kind of stuff, with all of these diversity things, one is about intentionality. Two is understanding the impact, as was stated earlier. But three, you've got to go just above and beyond. So as one person here asked me about bringing in, he wants to have more Black music teachers in Lincoln. I said, well, start off with your clinicians. And you can't just have like two clinicians, because these mostly white kids are then going to go back to their mostly white school with their white teacher. So they're still only going to experience that. You need to saturate them with diversity. And so you need to saturate your audiences with this diverse repertoire. And again, with a lot of the stuff that we talked about, you're not dealing with cultural appropriation because it's the music that still sounds like the stuff that they already know. So yeah, just think about going above and beyond. And we're here to help at certain amounts, but we can't do all the work for you. We have done some work.
Well, what I have told people is, after a certain point, you have to pay my fee. I'm available, but I put the information available for you, and for free, and if you need more guidance beyond that, then we need to enter into a mutually beneficial private arrangement.
Yes. Thank you so much, Dr. Daryl Taylor, Dr. Marcus Garrett. For everyone, you should know all our guests for the series here. We've given them a modest honorarium to thank them for their time. It by no means pays your fee, but thank you for just knowing that we've got this coming to you, and for sharing your wisdom and conversation and your love of our art form with everyone. And I think hopefully everyone can see what I see. These are two gentlemen who have this inquiry and who want to pass this along so that we can dig deeper and really get more composers from the Black and African diaspora out there, get more music out there so people can really understand more of our story, that there's more to our story than meets the eye. So I really want to thank you both for this time. I look forward to seeing you in person sometime soon and continuing the conversation as well. So you all can turn your screens back on now if you like to, and show your appreciation in some way, applause, or whatever you want to do there. to acknowledge this wonderful conversation. And so one of the things about the Black experience is flexibility in the moment and being spontaneous. Yes, we had intention to go back to the rooms, but the conversation just seemed to need to keep going to get where we got. And so I'm not going to send you to rooms for 3 minutes. But I would say if someone has one just burning question, you're welcome to put that in the chat here, and we'll kind of close off this way before we go into our after conversation, which from 12:30 till 1, and I can go a little longer. I've committed to stay and just unpack some of this and just talk deeper about repertoire with those who want.
Ask, since we have everyone's video on, if they could just present their questions. I'd love to see the person. So
Yeah.
see to whom we're speaking.
So if anyone has one, we have time for one burning question. I've got some that were written before, but something may have percolated from the conversation. I'm scrolling through my screens. I'm not seeing anything yet. People are processing. I can see it spinning.
Well, someone mentioned earlier about how about offending people, and we kind of touched on it. And I think about, for those of you who, you can put in the chat, there was a piece that was premiered by a very famous composer where it started a riot. If you want to, help folks out, mention that in the chat. It's all about, I want to make sure everybody's still engaged. And so things happen. Things happen. You're never going to please everybody. So back to what I was saying about, how to describe spirituals. I say I use Negro, but that doesn't mean that every Black person is going to be okay with that. I know Black people who say Negro is an old term. I will only use African American, and that's fine. I have my reason, because we can't
like African American at all.
Right. I mean, and there were like composers like Det, that they called themselves Negro composers. You look at all of his resources, all of the writings. He said Negro because during that time you couldn't call them Black. They were offended by that. So for me, with the slave, I'm not going to go back and retroactively grant citizenship because we know they weren't citizens. They weren't even considered whole people. Right. So that's why I don't call them African American spirituals. But people have their reasons. As long as you have your reason and you understand that there will be people who will be offended by it, will send you nasty letters, who will make Twitter posts about you and come up to you after a concert to say that kind of stuff, you just got to be like, okay, you have a very valid opinion. And the great thing about conversation is that I can just listen to you and say, okay, and then we can go about our merry way. Sometimes it just has to be that you have to let some people just be upset because you'll never be able to please them.
I had this very conversation
I
with
get,
a student just last week.
The major concern is that you don't want to disenfranchise your sponsors or people who say, well, okay, you don't care if I'm offended. Well, then I'll take my sponsorship from you, and you can have your opinion without my money. And so educating people and getting people on the same page is usually a worthwhile endeavor. Mm-hmm. Negro, very often the term Negro or the term colored or other things they are serviceable as an historical marker. And so that the National Association of Negro Musicians did not change its name to the National Association of Black Musicians or of African American musicians because it was founded in 1919, where that was the term of respect at that time. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People did not change its name because colored people, they fought hard to have that term for that time, and so it is a respectful term. Now, don't then take that. This is your PSA for everybody. Don't then take that as license to go and think that you can call every Black person colored and say, "Oh, you colored people, you will have a problem. There will be a problem," or you go up and say, "Well, I just love all of the Negro people in my neighborhood." Say, whoa, did you just walk out of a time machine and come out of 1945 where that's appropriate? Even now, it is a kind of a statement on the dynamicism of Black culture, that there is this tug and pull on how are we seen and how do we see ourselves, and why is it even important for us to be seen as anything other than just people? I saw a discussion recently where someone says, "Do you prefer to be referred to as African American or Black?" I said, "I would prefer to be referred to as Daryl, and or Dr. Taylor, and let's move from that place." And and if you know me intimately, then we can dig a little deeper into um, um, my roots in Africa, or my roots elsewhere. But my Africanism doesn't affect me in my ability to sing WC. It doesn't affect my ability to sing Purcell. And so therefore it certain shouldn't affect these other things. And your non-Africanism shouldn't affect uh, negatively impact your ability to participate in all of Western culture, Western civilization.
I love that we're all three in agreement there. It's really interesting how our synergies there. And again, we could have the same conversation with three other black persons, and we would have differing perspectives there. We're gonna let it sit there. That's the time that I committed to you, Daryl and Marcus. Thank you again so much for being with us today. We really appreciate your wisdom and your thoughts and your generosity of spirit. And you're welcome to stay on if you want to for overtime, or you can hop off now. And anyone that has a 12:30 or an 11:30, depending what time zone obligation, you're welcome to hop off. And we'll see you next week. We'll be in touch with emails from Liz and the team to get you ready for our 4th session next week with our action planning. But this is kind of the after party here now, our lunch conversation. So you can go grab some food if you like to, as we begin to kind of unpack some of this. Yeah, as Marcus said, the meeting after the meeting.
Well, thank you, everyone. I have to go. I have to sing, record for church on Sunday, so I cannot stay. I'm going to eat a little bit of lunch to make sure that I get through that full recording session. So thank you again, everyone. It was a blast.